How do you think the world received the Melbourne Games?
Well, I've had opinions from people who've been to many sets of games, and I think it's generally considered that Melbourne was the best of all the modern games, the most successful from the point of view of the nations who participated, the spirit that was evident during the games, the events themselves, and the enormous popularity of the games with all those who attended them. They were enormously successful, undoubtedly.
It was not without its political overtones, because there was the Hungarian crisis immediately
right
prior
in the middle of it.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know whether it would happen that way nowadays, but certainly at the time it was a very serious happening, and but it passed over. I saw the soccer match between the Hungarians and the Russians, and all the rough play was on one side, I must say, if any, because there's not much rough play in soccer. But what there was, certainly the Hungarians were the offenders.
Well, the water polo was much the same.
Yes, that's so. Yes, so it was. Of course, that's a sport that lends itself to rough.
Yes, indeed, especially under the water. Do you think that the problems that the centre wicket area at the ground has had in recent years can be related to that resurfacing you spoke about? Resurfacing?
No, certainly not. That area wasn't disturbed. That was left. The Melbourne Cricket Ground at that time, before the games, was all black soil, Merry Creek soil, and that applied for about anything from 3 to 6 or 7 feet deep. Now that area was left untouched. The regrading all happened around the centre. There was a slope on the centre, but that was levelled. And what happened subsequently had no relation to the games. That wasn't disturbed, that area. It was in the middle of the tracks. It was left there and wasn't disturbed. And that applied, of course, during the occupation of the ground by the forces during World War II. That wasn't disturbed. So that it was the same or similar soil as it was before the games. So the regrading didn't affect that area.
Well, what then is your opinion of what's caused the change in the wicket? Because it used to be a glass fast wicket, and now it's so dead slow.
Well, it's not due to any disturbance on the regrading. It's due to what's happened to the ground itself and the grass. The grass has changed. Experiments have been carried out, and unsuccessful with different grasses. And well, there's probably a number of causes, but I understand that a grass that they're using now is going to be the solution of the winter and summer growth conditions.
It does get an awful hammering, doesn't it?
Oh, that didn't affect it before the games.
No.
As a matter of fact, it was generally accepted that the stirring it got in the football season, the stirring up and aeration of the soil was good. And certainly I think those of us who were interested before the period of the games, or in the old days, didn't notice any difference because of seasonal conditions. It only took about 3 weeks for the ground to be restored after the football season, the centre area, but certainly something's happened.
Reverting to the Olympics, Sir Albert, do you think it would be possible for the success of the 1956 Olympics to be repeated?
I would doubt it, quite frankly, because of what's happened internationally. International relations are so different now. There's been different alignments of countries. We know what's happened with successive games. They've had problems that didn't exist at that time. And I can't see that success of 1956 being repeated in the same way. So each series of games has had international problems since then, and they've been aggravated since the international relations. I don't see why they couldn't be repeated in the events themselves, but it's all the outside changes that have taken place. Relations between countries have made. I personally think the Olympic Games should no longer be held on the same scale. I believe there ought to be one venue for the world and let them all accept that. They'd be more likely to accept it than with the rivalries that are inevitable with changing the venue every year.
When 1988 was proposed for the Olympics in Melbourne, of course the Melbourne Cricket Ground was to be the main stadium again. That plan has obviously been scrapped, and 1992 is now being formulated in people's ideas as being Melbourne's Olympic year. Could the Melbourne Cricket Ground again stand being another main stadium? What would be the ramifications for the club, the extra building required?
There'd be no problems at all. The big problem would be finance, not caused by the Melbourne Cricket Ground being the venue. The financial problems would be reduced by comparison with another venue which would have to be specially built. But finance today has got so far out of hand, the costs of staging the games in Canada and every other, Munich and everywhere, it's just so enormous. And the Olympic authorities look to television revenue to provide most of this. Whether that's feasible, I don't know. I have my doubts. I don't think the Olympic Games are any longer a truly international event as they were during the 1956 Games.
During your term as president of the club, was lighting of the ground for night play, night football, night cricket ever envisaged?
Oh yes, and explored, and estimates taken out of costs. And the trouble with lighting the Melbourne Cricket Ground is that the events are not under the control of the Melbourne Cricket Club. See, if it's football, it's the BFL. The club doesn't stage the events. And the VFL wouldn't finance a lighting installation, which is very expensive nowadays. It's getting into millions.
Yes.
And as far as cricket's concerned, it just does not produce the revenue to finance, pay the servicing costs of the loans that would be required for lighting. So it's very simple. It's purely a matter of money. Also of land. Would require a bit more parkland to go out into the park with towers, that sort of thing. But the main problem is one of finance. It just would not pay the club from the revenue it would get from its arrangements, a percentage of gates and all that sort of thing, to finance a lighting installation. The lighting installation at VFL Park, for example, wasn't financed by the VFL.
No.
Nor was the lighting installation in Sydney financed entirely by the
trust.
The trust, because they don't have a club managing the ground such as we have. And there's plenty of I think wherever lighting's been used, the problem has been one of finance.
Yes.
The quality of the light doesn't seem to present any great problem.
Do you see the Melbourne Cricket Club continuing in its present form indefinitely?
I don't see why not. It's been a very successful institution, and provided it keeps up with the times and the needs of the times and adapts to the changing circumstances surrounding the sports, I can't see any reason why it shouldn't carry on. The big waiting list has always been a problem, but there it is. That's probably it's probably because it's so good.
Mm. And it has a cosmopolitan membership.
Oh yes, quite cosmopolitan. Yes, I think probably the football side of the club suffers from that
Does the committee ever give any thought to its public relations? What people on the outside think of the Melbourne Cricket Club as an entity?
Oh yes, it does. It has always been very concerned with the public. And I must say that the public attitude to the Melbourne Cricket Ground has always been one of great acceptance. And we have never had criticism of the club as such. The club has been, the committee has always been very conscious of the need for good public relations, and still is, because it'd be silly to be, not to be, wouldn't it?
No, when you're hoping to attract 60, 70, 80, 90,000 members of the general public to the ground.
Yes.
You want to keep on very good terms with them.
That's so, and also it's available for other things. I remember the Billy Graham thing and the ecumenical conference here when it was held here. It was a logical and very successful venue for those. I think the biggest crowd ever on the ground was the Billy Graham Sunday, I think.
And yet it's been used in recent times for things like military tattoos.
Well, that's only a financial thing and also a service to the public. That military tattoo has been a pretty popular event. And although it's a commercial operation, the financial side hasn't been the main, I don't think it's been the main consideration. It's been a public sort of thing that stemmed from the Edinburgh tattoo and then the couple that were organised in Tasmania. It's a pretty popular public sort of event.
Do you see the MCC being the venue, or the ground itself being the venue for big pop concerts?
Yes, oh yes. Well, pop concerts are a little bit different.
You can say that again.
They attract a different sort of following, don't they? And we certainly wouldn't want some of the things on the ground that have happened to other venues of pop concerts, but we've had them there, you know. We've had pop concerts.
Yes.
But you have to orient them to one side of the ground to use the stand accommodation to advantage. They're not much good out in the middle. You've got to get closer than that, pop concerts.
The ground has always jealously guarded its membership provisions, and I recall a bit of a furore in the early years, just after the war, when Sid Barnes, for instance, had left his player's ticket and jumped over the hurdle to turnstiles.
Yes, well, he was lined up over that.
Do you think that's necessarily a part of the image of the club?
Oh, strict control?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think that's what the public want. Public above all, they want to know and have confidence that they're being treated the same as everyone else. Now, we've always been very strict in the control of admittance and all the rest of it, in the interests of the public. Because they're the ones who resent all this larrikinism and breaking rules and all that sort of thing. And the police have been very cooperative in that too. Been very good. I don't think any other ground in Australia's had as good police control as we've had down there.
No, that's true.
Of crowds. And you mustn't relax those controls. They can easily get out of hand.
Sure, as they have on some occasions during some very beery Sunday afternoons at cricket.
Oh, yes. Yes, well, I think that's...
But they've been isolated.
Yes. Well, there's been a certain amount of it probably tolerated just as far as you can tolerate anything. You've got to have some tolerance. But the conditions of applying to the public, the admittance and control, they must be the same for everybody. You can't relax them for one element and enforce them for another.
Can I finally ask you to recall some of the great footballers you played against? We mentioned earlier Ivor Warne-Smith. Dave McNamara was an opponent of yours and a friend.
Yes, he was, and he was a great player. Probably the best kicker of a football of all time. Don't think there'll be another.
He did hold still I think holds the record for the long distance kick.
Oh, he would, I should think.
What was his specialty?
Place kick. The place kick has gone out of fashion. I'm inclined to think it will come back. It's very accurate, and place kick is not a hard kick, and you certainly get distance and consistency of conditions and all the rest of it. I don't see why it's still retained in other games, rugby and other games.
Did he have any special method of placing the ball?
Oh yes, he used to place it up on a mound and place it very high. That was in order to get his boot under the ball, and he used to be very fussy about his run up to get the maximum of follow through and power. He was very careful to place his foot in the act of kicking right opposite the ball, or a few other things too.
He was a left-footer?
Left-footer, yes. Big chap, 15 stone, 6 feet 4, and a powerful man. Very fair though, very fair player, and a very fair man.
And he kicked one against you one day that out at St Kilda that you eventually measured.
We paced it out afterwards, yes. The ball, he placed it behind the centre from the goals. And
on the defensive side of the centre?
Yes, on the defensive side of the centre. And it landed halfway up the bank, in the crowd halfway up the bank. And we actually measured it afterwards. It was 93 yards.
Was there a gale blowing?
No wind.
No wind?
No, it was a calm day. Yes.
Incredible.
Oh yes, that was one of the things about it. That's one I was personally involved in, and I think most of his legendary kicks were measured. They were factual. They weren't just something thought up by reporters or that sort of thing.
And what about the man who at Melbourne has become a legend in his own lifetime, Ron Barassi?
Well, Barassi is. What about him? I don't know. There's anything I could say about him that hasn't been said.
You've been associated with him since his youth.
Oh yes, all the time he played with Melbourne. Yes. Oh yes. He was a good player and a good club man, Ronnie. Because his father played. His father was killed at Tobruk. He played with Melbourne before World War II.
Was his, can I say, quite defection from the club to coach Carlton a great loss?
Well, it was to the small boys who used to make him a hero, you know, or one of their heroes. Oh, you mean on the playing side?
Yes, and eventually as a coach, because there was no secret of the fact that he was eventually going to take over from Norm Smith as coach.
Well, that was the general idea, yes. That's the general idea. Anyway, he's back again, isn't he?
Yes, indeed. And the Demons are going through hard times.
Yes, they are. Yes. Yes, well, I don't think I comment on that.
But the wheel will turn full circle.
Oh, yes. Yes. I think they're very glad to see him back. But if the team doesn't succeed after a period of time, no doubt there'll be people who'll want further changes.
Such as it always was.
Yes, that's the way.
Sir Albert, thank you very much.
Thank you.